Hi guys, welcome to this week's video. So this week I'm going to be putting insulation on the roof. As you can see there, we've done the pointing. Now we need to insulate the roof. The first thing I'm going to do is obviously we've got a sort of what they call a cathedral-style roof. So it's going to be a big open plan roof. And as you can see there, we've got beams running down. And I'm going to measure between the beams and then cut a piece of insulation, hopefully to fit inside of it. So let's get going. I know the length of my pieces of insulation, so I'm going to try and do as long a piece as possible. I measure the top, measure the bottom of between the beams, and then we go and measure the insulation. So I'm now going to measure out the measurements that I've taken onto my insulation. I've got a little trick for you. When you measure out the length, you can use the tape measure just to put an indent into your insulation, and then you've got a marker there. It just makes it a lot quicker and a lot easier to do. So once you've got your measurements either side, I've just used a piece of wood and I've clamped it in place. So this gives me a guide, so when I'm sawing it, I've got a guide and I know exactly the line that I need to cut. I just use a simple wood saw. Any saw, the finer the teeth, the better actually, but any wood saw is great and cuts through the insulation pretty easily. When you're cutting insulation, it's kind of nasty stuff and it does have quite a lot of fine particles. So make sure you're wearing a mask, goggles, and I wear gloves as well. It's quite important. So we now have our piece of insulation cut to size. Let's hope it fits. However, it's probably unlikely to fit perfectly because these are old beams and they're slightly bent and got little knots in them. So I'll show you how the best way to fit this in between the beams so you have a good snug fit. I'm having to push mine up above another beam to get it tight to the next piece of insulation. As you can see, mine's fitted perfectly. That's obviously down to my perfect measurements, but it doesn't always happen like that. The best way to do it to get it a really good snug fit is to use your saw and go in between the beam and your insulation and cut down, and that will just ease it, just shim off a mil or two to ease it into place. And that's the best way to do it because you want a snug fit but not too tight that it's going to push against the wood too tightly. When we put in the new windows, we'll actually build the wall right up to the up to the wood. So I'm only putting the insulation up to where the wall's going to be and not necessarily all the way down. So we've got all the insulation up, the foam insulation. The next stage is to get the sort of thin TLX, it's called TLX Silver, which is lots of multi-layers of foil and foam and things like that that give great insulation but at much smaller thickness. So for us, we've got the thick foam in between the big beams, the small beams, as you can see there, and then we're going to be putting the TLX over them. And the reason we're using that is so that it's thinner, but it means that we can then still see the thick beams, so we're still going to keep some of the character of the roof. The other alternative is to use obviously thicker foam, and by doing that you might actually then expand the size of the roof so much that you have to then cover the big wooden beams. So we're using this thin TLX Silver, it's called, and that's what we're installing today. So as you can see from this offcut of TLX, you can see all of the multi-layers that are in it, but at the same time it can be very, very thin. So we're using a hammer stapler to hammer staple them up. Again, I would recommend if you're doing this to buy one because it's good fun and it's a lot easier and it saves on your wrist from using a normal staple gun. So we're using foil insulation tape. It's kind of like got a sticky backing to it, and you need to use this to seal the edge of the TLXs when you cut them to size, but you also need these to use the seal when you have two pieces. You need to overlap them by at least 5 centimeters and then put tape down those joints as well, and tape around the wall and any woods. You're basically trying to make a seal in the actual ceiling. So we've put both layers of insulation on. There's a few gaps, but these are left either because we're going to be building a wall up to them or because we're going to be installing a chimney and we don't quite know where the flue's going to go, so we'll do them later. But other than that, it's starting to look fantastic and you can really start to see how the roof is going to look when we actually put the wood roofing over the top of the insulation. Thanks for watching my video this week. Please click the subscribe button that's on the screen now, and I'll see you next week. Cheers guys, bye.